The right stuff popularized the image of the fighter jock. These were privileged young men who drove fast sports cars, partied all night, then went up at dawn in their high-powered fighter planes. So goes the image of a fighter pilot in Hollywood. In Tuskegee, it was very different. But the Tuskegee Airmen, without question, had the right stuff.
It's said that the 99th Fighter Squadron was probably the best educated squadron in the history of the Air Force.
Tuskegee, Alabama, had few distractions for young black men. There were no bars, no pilot groupies, no sports cars. There was one movie theater, which welcomed the pilots only to its colored section.
They realized that they were existing in a sea of hostile whites. And they realized that their only salvation lay in superior performance. Now, it's that simple.
The young trainees took to the air with energy and discipline. The stakes were enormous, the competition brutal. 8 of the original class of 13 washed out. On 7 March 1942, 5 lone eagles received their wings at Tuskegee. It was an historic day.
The job remained, however, for the 99th to prove that it was capable of performing successfully in combat.
Mid-1942 saw the Allies gearing up for the liberation of Europe. While the British hunted the desert fox in North Africa, the 99th awaited combat assignment. While they waited, they trained. By spring 1943, with North Africa secured, Allied planes began to strike at Sicily. Meanwhile, the 99th arrived at a rear area in North Africa and awaited combat orders. All the time they waited, some 2 months, they trained. By the time they arrived at a forward position, they had logged an astronomical number of hours in the air, but not 1 minute in combat.
Nobody really believed that though these pilots had demonstrated that they could fly airplanes, that they could fly airplanes successfully in combat.
The 99th finally saw action out of Tripoli. They struck across the Mediterranean to hit targets on Sicily. They strafed airfields. They performed surgical bombing on military installations. These tactics may sound familiar. They were said to have won the Gulf War. But in 1943, there was no glory in strategic bombing.
These are not glamorous assignments. You don't get headlines.
They flew the P-40 Warhawk, made famous by the Flying Tigers.
It could take a lot of punishment. You could come home with holes in the wings. I even once landed with holes in the coolant on this thing.
The P-40 was without question a good airplane. And about the only complaint that we had about it was its altitude capability.
Its altitude ceiling made the P-40 a sitting duck for the Germans. The Messerschmitt 109 could always strike from above and out of the sun. The only solution was a new plane, the P-47 Thunderbolt.
It had the altitude. It gave the pilot confidence that the 8 caliber 50 machine guns would destroy anything immediately that they hit.
The P-47 was a real warhorse, but then came a racehorse, the P-51 Mustang.
This really was the airplane that all of us loved even more than the P-47.
But it was a pilot flying the P-40 that gave the 99th its first aerial victory. On 2 July 1943, Charles B. Hall shot down an FW-190. General Eisenhower arrived to congratulate the pilot. It seemed the Tuskegee Airmen, too, had arrived. But then came hard times. More than 6 months passed without another victory. Meanwhile came the attrition of combat. The 99th lost several planes due to accidents and flak. They gained no victories because there were few opportunities. But bandits they saw were not eager to tangle.
When they came in running, so to speak. They came in to do what they had to do, and they were gone.
In World War aviation, the measure of success was enemy kills. By January 1944, the 99th had only one. Their lone victory was raising old doubts and prejudices. John Sloan quotes a high-level memo from the time.
The Negro type does not have the reflexes nor the intellect to fly fighter aircraft. They have no discipline in the air. They scatter when they are attacked, etc., etc., etc.
This memo was seen only by a few. An article in Time magazine was seen by the whole nation. Time hinted that the Air Command was dissatisfied with the performance of the 99th. They even asked, quote, "Is the Negro as good a soldier as the white man?" Unquote. Time called its article, "Experiment Proved." As the storm broke, Benjamin Davis Jr. happened to be in Washington. He had returned stateside to activate the 332nd Fighter Group. This all-black group was to include 4 fighter squadrons, including the 99th. Before getting his new fighters off the ground, he had to clear the air. Davis was called before Congress to defend the combat record of the 99th, amid rumors that the unit was about to be transferred out of combat. The 332nd, in fact, had just been issued a different plane, the P-39, an obsolete fighter unfit for combat.
In other words, the word was already out that the 332nd was going to be assigned not to combat, but to patrol duty.
Patrol duty was the grunt work of the air war. And anticipating nothing better, John Sloan shipped out with the 332nd. The date, 29 January, 1944. Word hadn't yet reached him of what had happened one day earlier.
Beginning on the 28th of January, the 99th had become engaged in combat with German aircraft over the Anzio beachhead.
It was probably the #1 air action that took place during the Italian air campaign.